job for him. We'll be in your neighborhood soon. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 2. My children now.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 1985 sequel to A Nightmare on Elm Street, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. The film is directed by Jack Shoulder and it stars Mark Patton, Robert Englund, of course, as Freddy Krueger. We have Kim Myers, Robert Russler and Marshall Bell. Right, okay, this is obviously the sequel to the hugely successful first Nightmare on Elm Street film, which many regard as a horror classic, and rightfully so. This time round, it's set a few years after the first film, and Jesse has moved into Nancy's house from the first film, along with his family, and he starts having horrific nightmares about Freddy Krueger. And Freddy Krueger wants Jesse and wants his body. He wants to take over his body so that he can come into our world and kill freely once again. This obviously leads to a huge issue for Jesse, who feels like he's losing his mind, and it's up to those around him that care for him, such as his best friend Ron and his girlfriend Lisa, to try and help him through and figure out how to help him get rid of the villainous Freddy Krueger. Right, what are my thoughts on A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge? Well, a lot of people, and I completely get it, kind of don't have a lot of time for this one in regards to a sequel to the first one. And I do genuinely understand that. This film does play hard and fast with the rules that were set down in the first film. But I think when you consider now, I mean, Freddy Krueger and the Nightmare on Elm Street films are so embedded, if you like, into pop culture, and everybody knows who Freddy is. Everybody knows the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Everybody gets Freddy and what he does and how he does it. But back then, we'd only had one film. So they decided, obviously, to make a second one after the success of the first one. They decided to make it fairly quickly. They didn't ask, Wes Craven wasn't interested in returning. They didn't ask Heather Langenkamp back, or any of the original cast, really. They decided to go a different direction. And this is the first film, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, where the lead is a male. The rest of the ones, I think the lead has always been a female. And it just, I don't think they necessarily knew what direction to go with in regards to the sequel. Do they kind of build on what they did on the first one, or did they try and add some new layers to Freddy? And they tried to add some new layers to Freddy in this film, but the majority of them didn't work, especially when you reflect back on it. Now, this is one of those movies that I watched when I was younger, and I didn't actually mind the changes that they made. While I watch this now, obviously as an adult and a mature man, well, some may argue, but I'd like to think I am, I can look at this with more critical eyes. But when I was young, when I used to watch this like in the 80s and the 90s to some degree, there were aspects of the film I quite liked. The whole idea of Freddy trying to take over Jesse's body and, you know, come into the real world and stuff. I didn't mind it at all, and there were parts of the film that I certainly enjoyed. But when you look at this film now and watch it, I mean, this actually has become quite famous because of the homosexual subtext and undertones that go on throughout this film that I never picked up on when I was younger, obviously. But it is so obvious now when you watch it, it's quite startling. Now, the actor that plays Jesse Walsh, Mark Patton, is an openly gay actor. I'm not actually sure if he was openly gay at the time, but he likes to think of himself as the first male scream queen. And it is quite... It does stand out hugely, as I've said, some of the homosexual subtext that goes on throughout this film. It can't have been done intentional, and if it was, it almost a stroke of genius, really. Originally, as well, I found this fascinating because I didn't know this, that Robert Englund initially wasn't asked to return. They were going to use a stuntman as Freddy Krueger, and then they soon realised, not long after they started shooting, that this was just not going to work and they needed him back. So they kind of brought him back and paid him what he deserved. And we had Robert Englund once again in the role of Freddy. His most iconic role and an absolute horror icon. Interestingly as well, Michael J. Fox apparently was considered for the role of Jesse, as was a young Brad Pitt and others. Interesting, obviously they wouldn't have been known at the time when this came out. And Kim Myers, who was cast as Lisa Weber, Jesse's girlfriend, apparently was cast because she had a striking resemblance to Meryl Streep, which, again, yeah, you can absolutely see it when you watch this film. But, I mean, there is still quite a lot here, I think, to enjoy in this film. I think there are some effective scenes here. The scene with Marshall Bell being killed by Freddy, I always kind of scared me when I was younger, and it is quite effective, even if there are aspects of it that creep you out and don't make sense. When Freddy comes into the real world, whether you agree with what they did there or whether he should have come into the real world sort of thing. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, Nancy did that in the first one as well. So they didn't necessarily break the rules massively. They just kind of bended them a bit, I suppose. But I liked it when he kind of turned up at the end, Freddy at the party and all that kind of stuff, and it worked. I thought it worked for what they were trying to do. But when you look at it now, when we know the set rules of Freddy and stuff and how he operates, it doesn't work, obviously. And I thought Mark Patton was really quite good as Jesse as well. I thought he worked really well. I thought the scenes that he did where he was under real pressure and all that kind of stuff, I thought he gave a pretty effective performance here. So, I mean, you could argue that this is the black sheep of the family in regards to the Nightmare on Elm Street films, but I have to be honest, other than the third one and New Nightmare, I've only got like a vague recollection of the rest of the Freddy films because it's so long since I've seen them. So it might turn out that there is another one worse than this, I suppose. I don't think this is a disaster by any stretch of the imagination. But it's just, it can't, it cowers under the shadow of the first film, I think. I think that's fairly obvious. So let me know in the comments, guys, if you think there is a weaker one in the 7 Freddy films that we got, other than the Freddy vs. Jason, obviously. And I will obviously be going through the rest of them. I'm quite looking forward, certainly, to checking out the third one. I remember really quite enjoying that one years ago when I watched it. So thanks for joining me, guys. Let me know in the comments what your favourite Nightmare on Elm Street film is. And I will, of course, be back with plenty more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.